Hello, everyone, and welcome to Jewish Wisdom for Coping with a Pandemic. We have been here for months and months. Whether this is your first time or whether you've been here since March when we got started, it is a pleasure to see you. This is a drop-in meeting. We focus on Mussar as a way to elevate ourselves and give ourselves some coping mechanisms and also some community as we come together and have a chance to kind of share what's going on. And it's really been really nice as we've gotten to know each other from all across I would say the country, but we have some Canadian regulars too, so all across North America. All right, so as is our custom, we begin with a short meditation to become present and create a sacred space. So please relax in your seat and close your eyes. And take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. And as you go at your own pace of inhaling through the nose and holding, and exhaling through the mouth and holding. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them pass. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema, and on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, this week we are going to be picking up where we, with something that we came up with, that came up sort of toward the end of last week's class, and I wrote about it in this week's email. And so to begin with, for our initial, as we sort of work our way towards starting to practice honor, we're going to transition out of truth with one of the, with a quote from Exodus, which says to distance yourself from a false matter. So what does that mean, to distance yourself? How might we distance ourselves? What does that bring up for you?
I stopped watching the news or reading the paper.
Sorry, can't quite hear you.
All right, hold on. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, a little better. You're still a little bit quiet, but I can hear you.
Okay. I'll try to talk loud. To distance myself from a false matter, I am very selective about what news social media, newspapers I look at.
Okay, great. So what what you're talking about is like creating like a real like a behavioral distance where you separate yourself from news, which you've deemed to be. Now, is that an issue of just general stress reduction, or do you think that the news is not correct?
I think a lot of it's too shallow in its reporting. It's not well-rounded. It doesn't, and then especially with this chapter on honor, it does not ask a lot of the questions a good reporter might ask for a story. So whether it's actually false or not, I make my own judgments about that, but particularly in the past couple of years, I don't have enough tools under my belt to listen to this stuff and not get really, really angry. So until I do have experience with those tools and are able to use them successfully, I'm going to monitor what I allow myself to absorb. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I heard you saying was not really having the tools to not get angry for certain things you're reading. Yes, wonderful. What else? Who else has a thought? John.
There's not very many, but a couple of people that I tend to avoid because their energy is so negative, or also just because I've come to not trust them. I don't share information with them, and I mean, I could go on and on about that, but I won't. But it's just a matter of my comfort level with those people. I'm uncomfortable with them, so I try to avoid them.
Great, thank you, John. Yeah, so Carol.
I've spent a lot of time on social media, sitting here by myself, and a lot of it comes across that I don't trust. So I'm very careful about fact-checking anything before I pass it forward. And if something comes across my desk and I fact-check it and it's false, I politely say, please check your fact, or not even that. I just say, oh, this is false, and here's my documentation to prove it. If I can't prove it false, or if I don't want to bother with it, I just ignore it. But if I can't prove it false, then I let it lie, but I never pass it on. Never. Because that's how these rumors and nonsense get started. It just keeps getting passed and passed and passed. Hey, it looks good to me that, so-and-so did this such and such political person did this horrible thing. It seems in character. I'll just pass it on. Well, it turns out it's not true. Not that the person couldn't do it, but he didn't, or she didn't. So I don't pass it on.
Carol, if I can ask you a question, if you don't want to answer, that's okay. But back to this issue that Carrie raised, how is sort of the emotional temperature like within as you're dealing with some of those things?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but I'll try to address it.
Do you get really upset and angry when you're dealing with this, or do you keep a cool head?
Oh no, I don't really get all that angry about it. I get kind of mildly irritated. But in college, I took a couple of years of journalism. I was on a newspaper. And one of the first things we learned was you need to have 2, preferably 3 independent sources. That didn't mean, 3 different newspapers that got their information from AP, or from the same source, but they had to be independent. Like I had to interview 3 people that didn't know each other, 2 people that didn't know each other on campus or something.
I got it. I got the picture.
And that's really, really in me, I've noticed. And when I see these things that keep getting repeated, I go, these people call themselves journalists. What? This is terrible. So
Yeah.
Janet's smiling. She knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yes.
I don't know quite what to say about it because I am a journalist and I get very upset with people who keep charging false news, fake news, fake news. And in my mind, the news isn't necessarily fake. Sometimes the people are fake. I'm sorry to say. It's, you know, it's easy for people to call anything fake if it doesn't support their confirmation bias.
Too right.
Right. So I want to come back to this idea, and these are definitely phenomenon, and I think a lot of people can relate to that. They may disagree over which are the fake reports and which are the real reports, but I italicized yourself. And why might I have italicized yourself? And to give you a hint, I'm wondering, is this talking about the external world? Like, you know, I'm not going to watch the news, I'm not going to hang out with this person. Is there a way that maybe this is talking about an internal distancing?
Oh. Now I understand your question.
Can I talk?
Yes, please.
Wendy. That's kind of where I was thinking too, Greg, because I was thinking distance is a verb and it's an action and then being what I should do. So it's only addressing me. So I'm thinking question it, question it. If it's a false matter, then I distance myself by questioning it. I think that's kind of what I do. My kids say, I say it this way, I wouldn't be in that lane. If I had to disagree with something or if I think it might not be the right way to go, I wouldn't be in that lane. It just cracks them up. But I would question it. That's how I would distance myself from a false matter. I mean, maybe it's a false matter and I'm not quite sure, or maybe I just need to research it, but I wouldn't at any time espouse it, embrace it, act on it, endorse it, pass it on, or depend on it without questioning it first.
Thank you. Thank you. Janos.
When I'm distancing myself, like I'm very aware that at least in the United States and in Canada, the world is very divided in a black and white way. What I mean by that, you have either Republican or Democrat, or in Canada, we are liberal or that. So when you are like that, it's like you're thinking of there are two options, either this or that. So anytime you use the word or, you're only giving yourself to think about two things, and you're missing everything in between. So I think so we are very easily falling this trap to thinking, so if you think something, if we are all feeling we are all Democrats and that something comes up, but it's coming from a Republican's mouth, we ignore it because it's not ours. So I'm very aware of that, not to be in the right side or left side, because looking at there are so many other options we are just simply ignoring because it doesn't fit our general approach. That would be my avoidance.
Great, thank you. I want to share with you, I would share a thought and then we could get a couple more comments. I want to talk a little bit about, if we want to think back to the soul trait of equanimity, which is sort of keeping our center and being able to not getting too high, not getting too low. Eckhart Tolle gives a great, in The Power Now and in his writings and lectures, gives a great framework for this, which I interpret as like we have our true self and we have our ego self. And our ego self is the one that gets angry, but the true self doesn't. That if we can, as we grow in our mindfulness, we can sometimes sit there and say, wow, anger is arising in me, which is different than saying I am angry. Because if it's our, you know, the Jewish term might be it's our neshama, it's our divine spark, like that part of us exists on a higher plane, but it's these other parts that get reactive. And so one thing that I think about with this distance yourself is really trying to remember that it's this ego self is the one that's reacting and getting all upset. And then if I can sort of keep my equanimity, it can become sort of a cold anger or a curiosity or some other sort of emotion, which allows me to, you know, react in a better way, you know, instead of just lashing out or ruminating and staying up all night, sort of being able to keep a little bit of that distance or perspective. And this, for me, I find this very hard to do, but that's kind of what's resonating with me a little bit about this. Does that make sense to people? Does that sort of seem like I'm like, when I first sort of got into this sort of way of thinking, I would have thought I was speaking gibberish and not had any idea what I was talking about. But as I've kind of been around this a little bit more, I sort of like, oh yeah, okay, now I can speak to it.
Yeah, I've always liked the thought of the impartial witness, where you can hold yourself back, like it's not you experiencing the emotion, and observe it and keep your cool that way. I've liked that about equanimity.
Yes. Okay, well, let us start, given all of this, let's start talking about honor, which in Hebrew is kavod. It's a very important concept. As you may remember, if you've been here before, for each soul trait, we have four, or across the American Mussar practice, we have 4 assumptions, which helps us kind of move forward. And the one that I think is particularly important for honor is that there's a divine spark in everyone, but it's occluded by our baggage. And as we get into defining what honor is, it's sort of the foundation for why we do this. So may I have a volunteer to read this first bullet?
Honor is the ability to recognize the humanity in other people, feel empathy, and treat them with respect, dignity, and even with reverence.
Thank you. So what does it mean to recognize the humanity in other people? And how does that relate to what we've been talking about?
To me, it's acknowledging that everybody is created in the image of God. And however you might feel about the superficial characteristics that come across, or the political statements that you don't agree with that they might make, they also were created in the image of God, and they are due honor and respect for that. They're not the other and lesser somehow.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Gail. It's very well said. I think my experience with this, this is a big challenge right now. I don't know, I have a little bit of a bias, but you know, I wrote about this week. I got more unsubscribes to this email than I did to, you know, many in a while. I mean, people, you know, across the political spectrum really have a hard time. So I'm, of course, putting it out here for us anyway, because I think, you know, we don't have to be perfect at this, but I'm curious where this will take us if we kind of lean into it a little bit and see what guidance that might give us for dealing with the current situation. Carrie, would you please read the second bullet?
Both humility and honor concern how we relate to other people. Humility focuses on knowing our proper place in the world. Honor focuses on the converse, giving others their due.
Thank you. Thank you. So for the group, what's the essential thing? What do these two soul traits have in common?
They're about granting space, because you grant space to yourself enough, and then you grant enough space to another person.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way that you grant enough space to yourself, you don't allow them to take up too much of your space, you know, in your head or wherever, but you give them space. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Who else? Someone else want to phrase it in how they think about it?
Well, I keep going back to the baggage and the being occluded, the divine spark. And I believe that not everyone is facing this world through the same lens or experiencing it in the same way. And we can only experience the world through our own eyes and experiences and react to it that way. So it not be beneficial to judge others on how they react to events that we all experience at different times.
Yeah, so recognizing kind of a commonality of experience. You're experiencing an event, you react to it, and hey, this other person isn't experiencing an event, they're reacting to it. Now, their experiences are different from mine, so should we really be surprised that their reactions are different?
Exactly.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
I always say we're 3 days away from anarchy in any situation, and you don't react till you're hungry.
Well, that's a good reminder for me to stock up on my food, so at least I can
Or to share it.
5 or 6 days. Yeah, Wendy.
Well, I'm thinking when you said that, said, well, what is my place in the world? And I'm like, I don't know if I put myself in that place. I don't think I'm the one that necessarily decides that. So I'm thinking, if I have a place in the world, then others have a place in the world, and we're standing on the same level. I mean, they're just as good as I am, and I'm just as good as they are. So we all have a place in the world. Kind of draws us into humility, and you know, it's just kind of puts you on the same level as, and then you can go from there, springboard from there. That's kind of the thought that I had with that place in the world.
Thank you.
And we all share the sun and the moon, but we all see it very differently with what's allowed to us.
So a common theme I've heard in many people's answers is kind of us and others, you know, the way I see the world, the way other people do. And I think that that is really getting to, that commonality is really getting to the crux, especially of the honor portion. It's about relationship. It's about relationship with other people. And humility, anava, is also important for relationship, but it's kind of more like, how do I deal with myself so I can be in relationship with others? And honor is really about, okay, I want to put the other person at the forefront so that I can, you know, be properly in relationship with them. And so let's continue our exploration. I also wanted to bring up the soul trait spectrums for the two of these. As again, having too much and too little. Both of these traits have to do with, you know, as I said before, they're very relational. So what are some of the kind of relational traps that you might be seeing? Oops, sorry about that. If you just look at these, you know, at these two spectrums. You don't need to like come up with a PhD thesis, but one thing you notice or one thing that sticks out for you.
Well, if you're arrogant, then you can, the outcome of being arrogant could be rudeness. So with too little humility, then it could lead to too little honor.
Mm-hmm.
So they're connected, they're interconnected.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Joanne, were you starting to say something?
Oh, well, yeah, I was just relating it to my experiences of late, and how people want to be honored, but they don't always want to return the honor, you know, and then if they feel like you haven't honored them enough, then you're rude. And this is something that someone was in Prejean on my distance, my social distance. When I asked, well, I kind of, this was at the supermarket, indicated to them to please, and I probably said, please move back, because I had to get to the ATM machine, and the person was already there. And, oh, you're so rude, and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, and I just had to hear this, and it just rankled me. And then I am the sisterhood president at my synagogue, and it was something I had been discussing with one member, and she was giving me an argument about it. And then she comes to the meeting and lays out that with some other things as if that was her original idea. And I didn't say a word, but I thought about it, and I thought, and this is a person, you know, like we're doing this outreach to people and bringing some people a lot, because she wants hers delivered, even though she's the one who did the shopping, and she's here at the shul, and she was there the next day too, and she could have just picked it up. No, hers has to be delivered, and to her. And I don't even know if we have someone to do that. And it's just like, and the you know, 3 or 4 of us said, well, 2 people said they don't want it, and the rest of us just took ours home with us. You know, we're here with stuff that's here. You know, why make somebody have to do something for you? Like, does that prove something that you're worthy? I don't know. So I was not very happy with this person right now. You know, and I've gone out of my way to thank her and for doing this and that, and she gave me a whole lecture in the shul office yesterday about, you know, and when people make suggestions, you need to listen to her. And I showed her something that I did that was her suggestion. I said, yes, I know, but you know, she's not going to ever acknowledge that, yeah, I listened. It's a good idea. Let's do it. She listened and said it was her idea. That suggested, you know, and like.
Well, I'm reminded of a statement from Ben Zoma, which is, who has honor? One who honors other people. And so we can't control what we do, but if you're giving that person their due, you know, that's how we're expected to show up. Lainey, you look like you're percolating a little bit. I don't know if there's something you would like to add to this discussion.
Are you talking to me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm kind of in a different wavelength, I think. I've been thinking about honor in terms of my dignity, my respect for myself, my values. I mean, I definitely see the connection with respecting other people and their views and everything, but I think I've had a lot on my mind this week about, you know, post-election and this whole population that you know, some of the people can be, what should I say, without very good values. I mean, here I am sitting in judgment, but I had some encounters during the election with people that were malicious, really, really malicious and dangerous. And those are not my values. That's not who I am. And so I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a tangent, but I just see honor in a different way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. And I think you're bringing up some important issues. I mean, I think part of what you're bringing up, those are related things to honor. Some of them are sort of the American and Western definitions of honor, which aren't completely the same, but there is, a danger within the Mussar sense of honor of trying to, something called chasing honor, which is trying to get like all of the recognition and prestige for yourself, which is one of the big traps. But you're also bringing up an issue, I think, or what you're making me think about is one of the other things that I wanted to point out from the slide, which is that if we look at too much humility, we can get into a situation where we're, it could be self-debasing or we're giving up too much space. And I don't think that's what you were saying about your situation. But if you're dealing with someone who's being sort of rude or abusive, it doesn't mean that you have to sort of give them all the honor or give them the space and say, oh, yes, you're right. We also, as we're trying to navigate, with these challenging situations, we also want to really remember who we are and what we stand up for. And again, that's why I think everybody opts out of this email. It's like, look, I don't like the way they're dealing and I don't want to deal with them. And, the hell with their divine spark, I've got enough, this person was a jerk. And yeah, they did act like a jerk. And perhaps is there something more that we can do? So let's get into some quotes to see if there's anything here that might give us some hints. May I have a volunteer to read the first one?
I'll read. Do not judge your fellow human until you have been in their position.
Okay. So is that helpful? If we're dealing with one of these really rude people or these obnoxious people who feel that every idea has to be theirs, and, they're willing to get almost dangerous because of their personal views. How might this be helpful, or can this be helpful? Carrie.
I have a question. So if somebody's being really rude or you don't like what they're saying or something, and you say to yourself, I don't like what this person's saying, I don't see that as a judgment, because I'm not saying that person is wrong or stupid. I'm just saying I don't like it. So what I'm trying to do, especially now in this period of our lives, of the world, is disagree and try not to be. I am trying to put myself in people's place, in their shoes, because I know that a lot of these people who I disagree with have very different lives, different experiences, different upbringings, and have not had, okay, I'm going to be very snobby here. I don't think they've had the opportunity to learn how to be critical thinkers. And so I try to keep that in mind, because I am a very judgmental person. So where's the dividing line? When we don't agree with somebody, when we think what they're saying is stupid or misinformed, uneducated, or any of those adjectives, versus just writing them off as really idiotic people, and not. I'm sorry, I'm rambling here.
Yeah, I think I understand the gist of what you're saying. And it's like, okay, someone says something, really don't like it, disagree. Where might we, how might we react to this in a way that honors or doesn't honor that person?
I think I would say that's your opinion and you're entitled to it, and I feel differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
I mean,
you're talking about like what they're saying and
Or
characterize that as
that's
opinion. Yeah, okay.
because you shape your opinions by the knowledge you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Carol.
I was thinking more in terms of actions. When somebody does something I don't like, or I think is really stupid, driving is a good example for this. Somebody cuts you off. People get killed over this. I mean, this is really dumb stuff. People have, in my opinion, to get that upset about it. But I look and I say, hey, that was a really stupid thing to do. Okay, Carol, did you ever do anything kind of like that? And most of the time, I mean, unless it's flagrantly intentional, I can say, oh yeah, I've cut people off accidentally. That person probably didn't mean to do that, just weren't paying enough attention, or I wasn't paying enough attention. And it's easy when you do that to let that go. I haven't had a case of road rage since I don't even remember, because I understand that we all operate in ways where we just klutz along in this world.
Yeah,
Somebody cuts in front of you in line at the supermarket. You can politely say, excuse me, I think I was first. Or you can get nasty about it. Or you can let it go. Sometimes I just let it go and say, big deal. I'm not in that much of a hurry. Not that I ever go to the supermarket anymore, so I forget what that's like. But, or I might politely say, excuse me, I was here first.
Right. Well, I think I'm hearing from both of you sort of best versions of the behavior. Our response where it's like, hey, I don't like what you said. I don't like what they did. What's the worst version of that behavior? What's the other impulse that we have?
Well, like you're an imbecile, you're stupid, you're lying, whatever, that kind of thing.
Most recently on the news, a gentleman spit in someone's face because they weren't wearing a mask. I don't know if that made national news, but it was in Massachusetts. And it was the local rabbi's husband that did the spitting. And it was very upsetting. And he was arrested finally.
Well, I think it's easier sometimes with behavior than it is with hearing somebody say something. You get.
Hang on, Carol. Before we go down that road, I want to focus in on what Joanne said, because how was that different? It's like, you're an imbecile versus I don't like what you said. One is kind of a character assassination. One is a judgment about the person. Like there's a line, it certainly didn't come from Hamilton, but it's in the musical Hamilton, hate the sin, love the sinner. Where if it's you're dealing with someone's behaviors, that's different than just writing them off. Because if someone's an imbecile, if they're, whatever, I think it's that much harder to
There's nowhere to go with that.
remember that maybe there's some core of humanity in there. I want to do, I want to give us a nice juicy time to talk today. So I'm going to jump ahead to the share, because I don't think we're going to have time to go through all of these quotes. But I want to come back to this one. So there's a reading. Can I have a volunteer to read this, please?
We are Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, and Bnei Israel, the children of Israel. Within us are the tendencies to struggle with who we are and who we wish we could be. Also within us is the capacity to go forward with intention and awareness and meet the encounters of our lives with honesty and wisdom. Within us is the capacity to see in ourselves and each other the face of the divine. Rabbi Yael Levy, directing the heart.
Thank you. Rabbi Levy, she was talking about this week's Torah portion. This is the portion where Jacob is wrestling, wrestles with this angel or wrestles with God or this divine being, and God changes his name. His name is changed from Jacob, you are now Israel, and there's a lot. And it's interesting, Israel is like this higher order person, like this person of wholeness. But as the story continues, sometimes he's referred to as Jacob and sometimes he's referred to as Israel. So it's not like it's this one-time sort of transformation, boom, we're always our best selves from here on in. That's not the way it works. And so what I love about what she wrote here is that, we are both of these. But because we are both, we have choice and we also have the capacity to kind of sort of remember that divine spark in others. And so the question for your partner discussion is, in addition to kind of checking in where you are, it's like, and again, this is confidential and this is not recorded and you don't need to share this, but I'd really like to think about, do you really want to see the divine in the people you don't like? Maybe what's one step you might take towards doing so? And what's something that might hold you back? Okay, so I'm going to open up the breakout rooms here. Okay, so please click accept, and you'll have 5 or 6 minutes in the room. Stop the share. Deb, are you going to join your breakout room? All right, I will move your partner to somewhere else. And for those of you who are watching on the live stream, I think this is where, first of all, I'm going to pause the recording. Hello and welcome back. Well, for full confession, part of the reason why I really bring this topic up is I am so judgmental. I really can't stand people that behave in certain ways. I really would say I'm probably in the camp where I find it very hard to kind of find some divine in certain people who do certain things. And so I'm curious, does anybody come up with any suggestions for ways to kind of, and at the same time, I know that I think I will be better off and the world would be better off if I can find some ways to kind of remember the humanity in other people, even the monstrous people who should be locked up, to remember that they're human beings. So yeah, Laurie.
You just made me think, I grew up saying and being taught that honor is earned. It's not something you're just given, you earn it. And, and then with all of the learning, everybody is born with the divine spark. So everybody therefore deserves honor. So for me, those two things are completely in conflict. And like you, I have trouble sometimes honoring somebody just because.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Laurie.
Greg, when you said a minute ago, this isn't what I planned to say, but when you said a minute ago about people being monstrous and should be locked up or whatever, it reminded me of something. It reminded me of an article I read years ago about a person who was Catholic, but he was a lawyer, and he volunteered at a prison to give legal counsel to people that were on death row as a part of a Christian responsibility to do that. But what I found interesting about the story is that he got to know these people, and not only got to know these people, but got to know their families, like their parents. And the parents of these people would tell him about the dreams they had of everything being okay, that their children, something had happened, their children were being let out of prison, they weren't on death row anymore. And the humanity of that really affects me, you know, that even these people who are on death row have parents that love them. And, you know, just the trauma of all that is very moving to me.
Thank you. Janos.
Greg, I think that we all have this strong need to belong. You know, I need to know what's my village. And we have all our rules and expectations, and especially values and beliefs. And if people are from another side of the fence, we will not like them. For example, if I want to upset this group, I just can say like, well, I'm really happy for Chinese. They just landed on the moon. Awesome nation. And Chinese, they work hard. They have more fast trains than other people. Now, but then you guys will not like it because Chinese are a bad people. They're on another side of the fence. We supposed to not like them. That's my guess. I don't have science about this, but we don't like them because they're Chinese and they're communist.
Well, we certainly have our tribalistic impulses in our culture that can reinforce those and try to exploit that sort of natural distrust of the other. I mean, I think the Torah says, welcome the stranger because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. It says it over and over again, not because it's obvious, because it's very, very hard and it's the last thing you want to do sometimes. Janet.
I think the danger comes when you want to when we try to define somebody by one of their characteristics. Years ago, I interviewed Sister Helen Prejean, who wrote Dead Man Walking. And yes, she said, the murder that these men committed was horrible, but that's not the totality of who they were or who they are. And I thought of my own, my first husband's mother, who was a very gentle, kind soul, but she would spout the most horrible things about Black people. Was she an evil person? No. But could I balance that out with the good?
Thank you. I have a couple of readings I want to share. I'm going to need to stop sort of pretty close to on time tonight because I have something else that's going on. I want to, I'm going to share two things actually before we get to the Shema and Hillel, which I think is very important. The first one, and I touched on this, is in the email is, who is wise? One who learns from every person. So, you know, one thing that I sometimes try to do if I'm dealing with this difficult person, or if someone is behaving in a way that I don't like, is, you know, is there some lesson I can learn from them? You know, to Janet's, you know, example, it's like, okay, yes, in this part of the life, my ex-mother-in-law really was pretty icky. But in this other part of her life, I can learn maybe something about, you know, the really beautiful and loving nature. And within myself, how can I try to bring that lovingness to some issue that I need to do? The second, the other one, again, that I touched on in the, is that, you know, the Talmud warns us that the price of not doing this can be pretty high. And there's the story of Rabbi Akiva, who had 12,000 pairs of disciples who did not treat each other with respect, and they all died in just a couple of days. So I do think that as hard as this is, I do think it's important to try to find ways to remain in relationship with people with the appropriate boundaries. I mean, some people's actions are just beyond what we can do, but really trying to bring some curiosity and understanding without acceptance. And then May, as we head into the meditation, may I have a volunteer to just read this passage, and this will give us something to think about and aspire to as we do our closing meditation.
I'd like to read that.
Sure.
Although the house of Shammai and the house of Hillel disagreed, the house of Shammai did not, nevertheless, abstain from marrying women of the house of Hillel, nor did the house of Hillel refrain from marrying those of the house of Shammai. This is to show you that they showed love and friendship towards one another, thus putting into practice the scriptural text, love ye truth and peace.
Thank you, Carol. These were two sort of competing schools in ancient Israel. Hillel and Shammai disagreed constantly in the Talmud, and there was a real kind of bitter rivalry, or maybe a non-bitter rivalry, and they saw the world in completely different ways. But it didn't become a Romeo and Juliet type of situation, where they could still marry one another and they could still be together. So keeping that vision, let's all close our eyes once again and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. I'd like you to hold that vision of yourself where you're inhabiting, the Israel, your whole person, your best self, who can aspire to see the divine spark in others. What is one, just to allow your mind to quiet, with the intention of saying, what is one small way that you might marry into someone with differing views? Marriage is the, PhD level absolute aspiration. But what's the ninth grade version of that you could aspire to as a next step? Be silent for a minute and just see what inspiration comes. Now tilt your head back and smile. And one of gratitude for this hour in community together. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, thank you all so much for being here. Next week, we shall continue our exploration of honor, probably outside of the political and difficult people realm. I wanted to just share what came to me in my meditation. I thought about my neighbors whose house is just outside this window here. And they're not my favorite people in the world. But I just thought about how happy they were when they had their first grandchild. I was thinking that like that child will share the world, you know, God willing, with, you know, children in my family someday. And that was what came to me. And when I see them and I hear them spouting off, I do think, how can I turn the conversation towards asking about their grandchildren?
That's good. Common ground.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I need to go, but I wish you all a wonderful weekend, an early Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, Greg.
Goodbye, everyone.
Shalom.
Thanks. Bye.